Hello potential viewers, welcome to my channel. In this video, I would like to be a bit serious and sort of continue on the topic of censorship and information control in China. I hope you who are listening to this can see the parallelism I'm trying to draw between the actions already taken by the state of China since more than a decade ago and the kind of policies and laws advocated by what seem to be most of the Western liberal elites today. For this, I do not believe that the claim that China is not becoming like the West, but the West is becoming more like China to be some hyperbole uttered by people like Alex Jones, but a real and present threat in the world. And if you are still in disbelief, just take a look at Hong Kong and Taiwan. These are literally two of the frontiers where the ideals of Western freedom battles that of the authoritarianism with a Peking flavor. Now, on to my video. If you have been to China and get to learn about the place for a bit, you will definitely have heard of the terms harmony and harmonize. To a clueless outsider, or even someone who may have heard of it but still bears some level of naivete, this term does not seem to carry any egregious implications. But to those who live through some of the censorious policies and their enforcements, these are the terms of silence, blind collectivism, and ultimate irony. The term initially came from a 2004 social initiative as well as a set of general policy guidelines from the Chinese government and Chinese Communist Party that the people and the government, the party, should work hand in hand in order to create a harmonious society. This official designated goal of the building of a harmonious society had its stated top-down vision of economic growth, as well as the growth and development of the civil society. And just like any other top-down social plannings and initiatives, the suppression of opposing ideals and criticisms has always been a part of the plan. The way of the grabbing of censorious power and the enforcement of censorship started hitting every corner of internet culture, as well as the normal media sphere. And even the people who we might be calling normies nowadays started noticing the creeping control and loss of freedom of expression of even the most tame of opinions. Even videos, TVs, and movies with the slightest reference or indications of violence are forced to adopt censored versions of their presentation and images. One typical and slightly controversial example is the video game World of Warcraft, where necromancers, skeleton soldiers, and zombies are pretty common occurrences. They went through a lot of redesign of many of the characters, where skeletons are covered with skins, zombies no longer have red blood and have green blood instead, and the undead race are forced to be renamed into the Forgotten. And if you think about it, when even the normies are getting affected and having their regular daily entertainment altered to an annoying level, what about those who produces content that are on the more controversial spectrum, like social commentary, culture debate, and politics? The answer is really bad, as China did not have a very widespread TV and telephone network. The infrastructural development of internet was having a boom, while the censorship was drumming up. And it was also an age where China has begun its fast growth in economic power as it embraced many capitalist policies to a certain extent. Throughout the years, countless people have faced different retributions for their speech, whether it is expressed online or in real life. These retributions vary from short-term detention with a permanent record to many years in prison to silently disappearing and not heard of ever again. Many refer to Nobel Prize winner Liu Xiaobo as an example of the censorship and information suppression. But let's not forget that Liu Xiaobo was a prisoner pre-internet, and his persecution was largely due to his participation in the Tiananmen Square incident. And during the internet age, the sharing of information becomes easier, and so has the capturing of people of dissenting ideas. There still have been many more citizen dissenters and advocates for democracy and freedom ending up being silenced with different methods. One famous example is citizen journalist and investigator Tan Zuoren, who came to prominence for his continual investigation of the corruption and criminal negligence of the local government of Sichuan province, who are responsible for the grossly brutal school buildings that ended up leading to the deaths of thousands of children during the 2008 Sichuan earthquake. He was jailed in 2010 for the crime of inciting subversion of state power. And this was all done in the name of the grand vision of building a harmonious society. For the most part, those who have political knowledge and common sense knew that the claim was mostly a facade of state censorship and control, as well as the new wave of guiding principles that will serve as the core message of the state propaganda for the next 10 to 15 years. But many people having such knowledge or being enlightened on it does not mean that it will make a difference. In fact, indifference and complacency has only grown with the government's more and more restrictive measures. The phrase government encroachment is perfect for describing the degradation and decay of the sphere of public discussion under the numerous policies and laws, either publicly announced or silently and yet unanimously passed by the People's Congress from the early 2000s. In the name of maintaining harmony in the society and maintaining political stability, the suppression of dissent, of a convenient speech, and freedom of information has become more and more systematic, technical, and even surgical. It is like in the movies, yet much more expensive and much darker and more cruel than the romanticizing Hollywood depictions. The typical removal of a political dissident include three basic strategies besides the cliché of throwing them in jail. 1. The public smearing of the name and affiliations, which includes the allegations that dissidents are foreign agents or are acting in a foreign country's interest. 2. The destruction of dissidents' livelihood, which often involve the state pressuring employers or the supporters of the dissident to cut off all economic ties to debilitate them in their activism. 3. The public shaming of perceived moral failings. This can range from exposing one's extramarital affairs, of one's drug use, to straight-up lies about one's political or cultural views in order to stir up distaste and even hatred against the dissidents among the normal public. This should come as no surprise to people of nowadays that these measures were used by an authoritarian government in order to fully deperson the political dissidents. What is also worth noting is the promotion of nationalism, collectivism, and the anti-Western fervor and zeal, especially tailored to the youth. This is in fact a very simple yet effective strategy. Due to the recent history of China being invaded and forced to sign various treaties that were later considered insulting to the honor of the nation and the people. It is kind of coincidental that socialist regimes always end up resorting to some sort of nationalism as a central tactic for unifying its populace. If you watch my first video on the topic of movies and TV series with the movie Great Wall as a reference, then you would know that the push of propaganda with regard to nationalism, collectivism, and pride in cultural wisdom comes mainly in the form of entertainment. Obvious examples of this kind of entertainment propaganda push include, firstly, a myriad of movies and TV series with traditional Chinese themes, such as affairs within the ancient royal families, legendary folk tales, and kung fu, at times collaborating with studios in Hong Kong and Taiwan and feature relatively well-known stars from those areas. Secondly, the controlling of many new media outlets, which are often very active on social media and serve as alternative sources of information for the younger generations. The propaganda pushers behind them were definitely more familiar with the new and emerging social media sphere and the subculture than those who are in higher places of power, who are generally older. And thirdly, is the selective and highly deceiving import of foreign perspective in the scheme of forming a picture of the dying and malicious West. That is to say, the new information controlling machine since 1989 has no longer a perspective of barring all Western outlets from engaging the Chinese audiences, The suppression and control is reserved for those that have a history of being critical of the Chinese Communist Party and the government. But it is allowing certain import of foreign information. This kind of information has two sets of main sources. The Chinese nationals who reside in foreign countries have social media presence in the sites like Weibo and WeChat, and some of the relatively new information and news outlets who adopt more radical cultural Marxist ideologies and are generally against classic Western ideals or dead set on painting the West as in a falling state, such as Nowadays and Vice. This kind of combo control helps the propagandistic nature of the policies to obtain a facade of modernness and being less controlled and censored than it actually is. And these strategies did work and are still working quite well. It is not hard to find Chinese nationals in the Western world who not only have no appreciation of the freedom and opportunities afforded to them just by having them there, but also harbors a combative intention of desiring to take down the unfriendly voices in the West and even destabilizing the West itself, using their knowledge obtained in the West as their weapons. If you think this is exaggeration, just look into the case of Sydney University being pressured by Chinese students and the Australian Chinese student groups to fire a tutor, Mr. Wu Wei, a former Chinese national himself, by leveraging allegations of racism because the tutor said some unfavorable things about common cheating practices of Chinese students and showed a picture of a burned Chinese passport on his social media account. There is still more I would like to say, but this video is already too long. I would like to offer some suggestion of solution to the public sphere of public speech, but I am not confident at this point that I will have anything besides the call to not be silenced. And we must stand up to the liberal elites, who are not only willingly handicapping the ability of the West to stay independent of China, but pushing crucial industries to outside of the West, but are also knowingly infecting the West with a virus of authoritarian control of information under the names of curbing hate speech and combating fake news. I hope you find this video interesting. I hope to see you next time.